In 1852, a British anthology of Edgar Allan Poe's works included an illustration that quietly violated one of the most powerful boundaries in Western thought. The image shows an Egyptian mummy unwrapped, upright, and alert, engaged in calm conversation with modern men. Its mouth is open. Its eyes are aware. It is not rising in violence or rage. It is speaking. This is not merely an illustration of a fictional moment. It is one of the earliest known visual representations of a revived mummy in Victorian print culture. And its horror lies not in spectacle, but in intellect. The illustration appears in Some Words with a Mummy, a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, first published in 1845 and later included in the 1852 London edition Tales of Mystery, Imagination, and Humor, and Poems, printed by Henry Weistley. The illustrator remains unknown, yet the image is deliberate and unsettling. This mummy is not a grotesque corpse. It is composed, attentive, judging. Surrounding it are Victorian gentlemen, men of science, medicine, and reason, who suddenly find themselves outmatched by a figure they believed safely dead. The terror here is subtle but profound. The dead are not only alive, they are superior. Edgar Allan Poe is often associated with madness, decay, and supernatural terror. Yet Some Words with a Mummy is one of his most intellectually vicious works. The story describes a group of scholars who unwrap an ancient Egyptian mummy named Alamistachio, a name that already signals Poe's satirical intent. Through the application of electricity, the mummy is revived. This is not accidental. Electricity in the 1840s was widely regarded as a life-giving force, bordering on the miraculous. Poe weaponizes this belief. The very technology that symbolizes modern progress becomes the instrument by which the ancient world returns to judge it. Once revived, Alamistachio begins to speak. And what follows is not a curse, but an autopsy of modern arrogance. By the mid-19th century, ancient Egypt had become a cultural obsession in Britain and Europe. Mummies were no longer sacred remains. They were objects. Public mummy unwrappings were advertised as educational spectacles. Doctors dissected preserved bodies before audiences. Aristocrats hosted unwrapping parties as entertainment. Museums displayed corpses as trophies of empire. Ancient Egypt was treated as dead, silent, conquered. Poe understood the violence of this attitude. In reviving the mummy, he forces Victorian readers to confront a possibility they refused to acknowledge. What if the dead were aware of how they were being handled? What if they remembered? The revived mummy does not marvel at modern achievements. He dismantles them. He explains that ancient Egyptians understood electricity long before the modern world, practiced advanced medicine and engineering, preserved bodies not out of superstition, but anticipation. According to Alamistachio, mummification was preparation, not for the afterlife but for return. The implication is deeply disturbing. Modern civilization has not progressed beyond the ancient world. It has forgotten what it once knew. The illustration reinforces this reversal with chilling restraint. The mummy is calm. The living are unsettled. Knowledge flows backward through time. This is not resurrection as horror spectacle. This is resurrection as humiliation. Before this illustration, mummies in Western art were depicted as sealed, inert, silent. This image breaks that tradition. Here the mummy is upright, conversational, cognitively dominant. It predates the later trope of the cursed mummy by decades. There is no supernatural vengeance, no divine punishment. Instead, the horror is philosophical. The dead speak and expose the living as ignorant. Anonymity and authority. The illustrator's identity has been lost to history, a common fate in Victorian publishing. Illustrators were rarely credited, especially when their work was considered supplementary to the text. Yet the image carries an authority that rivals Poe's prose. It visualizes a transgression. The corpse is no longer passive. The scholar is no longer safe. The past is no longer mute. Whether intentional or not, the illustration crystallizes Poe's critique in a single moment of visual dread. Satire sharpened into horror. Poe's satire is merciless. By allowing the mummy to speak calmly and rationally, he strips modern science of its assumed dominance. The mummy does not rage, he explains. An explanation is more dangerous than violence. The implication lingers long after the story ends. If ancient civilizations were more advanced than we are, if knowledge decays rather than accumulates, then what exactly does modernity represent? The illustration does not answer these questions. It lets them rot in the viewer's mind. The ancestor of all mummy horrors. Modern mummy narratives, films, novels, and games owe an unacknowledged debt to this moment. The idea that a mummy could return, speak, judge the present, begins here. Not with a curse, not with a scream, but with conversation. This image is the quiet origin of mummy horror, not as monstrosity, but as indictment. Conclusion: when the past refuses to stay dead. In Some Words with a Mummy, Edgar Allan Poe imagined the ultimate Victorian nightmare. Not death, not decay, but rebuttal. And in this forgotten illustration from 1852, that nightmare takes visual form. A corpse sits up. It opens its eyes. And it speaks, not to terrify but to remind. The past is watching. It remembers everything. And it is no longer impressed. Some histories remain buried for a reason. Others rise and demand to be heard.